those, I think, the one, the decision items by 3:45, I think. Is that right, Darius?
I believe so. I think that it's
Okay,
made the budget and the approval of the annual report.
okay. We'll keep that in mind. Thank you, Director Siniga. Darius, do we have anybody that said they weren't able to make it, or?
Director Holguin said she might be late and Director
Okay,
Wheeler is unable to attend.
okay. In a minute or so, hopefully we'll get quorum. I don't think we have it yet.
We do now.
Oh, we do now?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, Director Burke. Oh, yeah, we definitely do. Okay. Well, let's get started, everyone. Welcome. And I call this meeting to order for the Non-Attainment Area Air Pollution Mitigation Enterprise Board. And I'll ask Darius for roll call.
Director Siniga.
Here.
Director Holguin, excused. Director Wheeler, excused. Director Stockinger.
Here.
Director Furco.
Here and struggling to find my mute button.
Vice Chair Baca.
Here.
And Chair Stevens.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Chair.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we'll first go to public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to give public comment? Please raise your hand or speak up. I don't see anyone. Darius, did you hear from anyone?
We did not get any requests for public comment this month.
Okay, as always, we welcome public comment, so please feel free to join us next month or send an email to CDOT staff if you have any comments. So we'll move to the first decision item, and that's approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Is there a motion for this item?
To approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes unanimously. Next decision item is the fiscal 2025 budget reconciliation.
Thank you, Chair. I did have invited Sam Foster and Ryan Long from CDOT's Division of Accounting and Finance to help with the presentation today and answer some of the questions that were posed by board members at the last meeting. I am just going to go through this reconciliation at a very high level. It did change slightly from what board members have seen with further reconciliation. Thus, this is the final numbers that we're asking for today. Line 4 shows the fiscal year 24 reconciliation, and that's totaling $1.972744 million. That is the amount of money that was greater than what was anticipated as far as revenue collection. Also includes interest that comes from the funds that are sitting within the accounts. So I did want to make that distinction on there as well. And then I may turn it over to Ryan Long a little bit to talk about how that revenue forecast is done and be able to answer questions. Additionally, what was the roll forwards from fiscal year 24 includes the $17.1 million in programming and projects. Most of that has gone to the small NAAPME grant program for this year. $130,000 from unused funds for administrative and operating, and $200,000 from unused contingency, which basically rolled forward into the current contingency account that the board approved when they approved this budget. The board has initially approved $18.25 million for the small grant program with $17.3 million in the current grant NOFO. Additional funds will be available for a future call for projects or when the board deems it feasible. Additionally, for the larger grant program, 7.6 million was allocated per the formula that was approved by the board of directors in February. That and there was no change to agency operations and administrative line items. There's no change to the contingency reserve, and the enterprise has no debt. That was with the total revenues of 30 million. There is planned expenditures of about 26 million. That leaves a remaining balance of unprogrammed funds of 4.3 million. Sam, is there anything else that you wanted to add on to this slide that I may have inadvertently missed?
No, that sounds good, Darius.
Thank you. Is Ryan on? I would love if he could take over and talk about these next two slides, please.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
All right. As a quick introduction, my name is Ryan Long. I'm the revenue analyst in CDOT's Office of Financial Management and Budget. So I was going to start with just a quick overview of our revenue forecast and then delve into the revenue reconciliation a little bit and kind of talk about just what happened and kind of how our forecast is going to look going forward. So the two primary inputs we use to try to estimate the growth rates of retail deliveries and retail deliveries and rideshare fees are actual revenue that we receive and the estimated growth rates from the 2019 Emerging Mobility Study we conducted a few years ago. I'll get back to those two a little bit more in the next slide. But the last major input into our forecast is a forecast of the Consumer Price Index. We use a forecast from Moody's, and that's used to estimate the fee amount, what the fee amount will be in future years. So right now we're estimating about $8.4 million in rideshare fee revenue in the current fiscal year and about $2.7 million in retail delivery fee revenue in the current fiscal year. Based on the revenue we've received through the first 5 quarters of this fiscal year, our revenue is trending pretty close to those forecasts at this point. We'll have to wait and see kind of over the next few periods, especially with the rideshare fee, since that revenue comes in on a quarterly basis. It can be hard to monitor the performance of it until we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. But as of right now, they both look like they're trending pretty close to the forecast. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this table shows kind of a breakout of the results of revenue reconciliation. So overall, we under forecasted for both the retail delivery fee and rideshare fees. However, the rideshare fee was kind of forecasted significantly lower than the actual revenue we received. And the primary reason for that generally comes down to the just a limited amount of actual data that we had at the time of forecasting. The forecast that was used to set the budget was completed in early FY24. So at that point, we only had 1 fiscal year of actual data, which makes it hard to estimate kind of year-over-year trends when you only have 1 year of data. So that's kind of the primary reason it ended up being so low. There was also in the first year of implementation, there was kind of a significant portion of revenue that came in after the fiscal year ended. So that kind of skewed how much we were seeing on a quarterly basis and kind of led to why our estimate was so much lower, because the revenue we were seeing coming in on a quarterly basis was artificially low, since so much of the revenue came in after the fiscal year close in that first year. And that just comes down to kind of growing pains with implementing a brand new fee. Going forward, as we get more actual data, I think we'll be able to zero in this forecast to be a lot closer kind of in future years. We'll just kind of within the next year or two, we'll have kind of a critical mass of data to where we'll be able to dial in a little bit more on these. At this point, I'd be happy to take any questions on our forecast, though.
Thanks, Ryan. Are there any questions? I don't see any. I think we are good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a proposed motion to approve the amended fiscal year 25 budget with that roll forward amount. Is there anyone who would like to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Furco. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All right, anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. We have one more decision item, and that is approving the NAAPME 2024 annual report.
Thank you, Chair. As required under the statute that created the enterprise is required to do an annual report to both the Transportation Commission and the committees of reference of the General Assembly at the end of each calendar year, that has information on the activities of the enterprise. This report that I think this is the third time that we are doing this report is up for your consideration today. In the actual report includes background information on the enterprise, a summary of the activities, including the start of the Community Clean Transportation Assistance Program, and other items that have happened throughout the year, which included funding decisions, eligibility discussions, board chair and vice chair elections, accessibility, translating of items. It also includes a financial status report based on the budgets to actuals for FY24 and the current future revenue estimates that we have. As Ryan noted, they continually update those, and we want to reflect that. And when those become available, we'll do new budget amendments, and of course, try to keep our 10-year plan updated with those revenue estimates as well. And also some potential future upcoming activities based on the board's discussion and what we know is coming on the calendar, such as the potential discussion on fee increase for the board's consideration. So this particular report is considered final if the board would like to approve it today, but we're open to any questions or comments or changes to the report before it is final. And with your approval for it, then that will give a staff authorization to include it in the Transportation Commission meeting for December, and of course send it over to the committees of record at the General Assembly. But happy to answer any questions if board members have any.
Are there any questions on the annual report? Darius, I have a question.
Yep.
So it's provided to the TC and the Senate and House Transportation Committees. Do you do any kind of oral report in addition to that to introduce it, or some kind of executive summary, or it just goes like as a written comments?
It goes as written comments. It goes as an information only item to the Transportation Commission, so in their
Okay.
packet for review. And in theory, I guess there could be something with the General Assembly, but they have never called us forth. It's usually just given in writing to them.
Okay, just curious. I just didn't know if we ever had any questions that came up on any of the work that we're doing, or but okay.
Well,
It seems like, yeah, it's a formality, and hopefully people read it, and so and know that we've been, busy and doing good work this year, especially this year where we, got the grant opportunity off the ground and stuff. So okay, just curious on that.
If I could note, Chair, that on the Transportation Commission sits a board of director who generally updates during her report to the commission on NAAPME activities as well. So they get a monthly update on that briefing.
Oh, good. Okay. Any other questions before we look at approving the annual report? Okay. Seeing none, there's the proposed motion. Anyone want to make that motion?
Sure. I will move that we adopt the 2024 non-attainment enterprise annual report.
Thank you, Director Stuckey.
Second.
Okay, the motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, the motion passes unanimously, and we can send on the report. So thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
All right, so we are moving to the update for the Community Clean Transportation Assistance Program.
Thank you, Chair. Wanted to keep the board apprised of the activities that staff has been working on in regards to the Community Clean Transportation Enterprise. One of the items is, of course, the website, which I believe board members saw a preview of, but in case you haven't, there is a link at the bottom of your packet. It will go to a specific page which outlines not only the basic information, it has a link to the NOFO in both English and Spanish. We'll have a link for frequently asked questions, which staff is currently compiling based on the questions that have been asked at our presentations at 2 meetings, which I'll get into in just a minute, and from email responses that we have gotten. Also includes the quick reference of the timeline, and now includes the press release, which was in the email that I sent out with the board packet, so to allow you to share that out as a kind of a quick hit to your network, to allow folks to know that this is live. Not a huge rush, but we don't wait too long. So we do have the timeline in place and everything there. Oh, I accidentally clicked on the website. My apologies. Let me see if I can get back here. All right. From the other engagement and outreach, we had made a presentation to the North Front Range NPO Technical Advisory Committee and answered questions with them. That was done on November 20th. Myself and Phil Von Hake, who is part of enterprise staff, made the trip up there. Additionally, actually about an hour or so ago, made the same presentation to the Upper Front Range Transportation Planning Region. Had to do that virtually. Unfortunately, would have liked to gone up there, but the schedule didn't allow it for today. Finally, the final presentation to the larger groups is, of course, the DRCOG Technical Advisory Committee. That will be done on December 16th in the afternoon, and we'll present to there as well. If there's other stakeholder groups who would like information, they're more than welcome to send questions or queries to the board, to enterprise staff through our email on our website, and we're happy to do so. We are planning to have a webinar, open webinar for folks, kind of an open hours to ask questions if they haven't. We are planning that out and we'll try to get that done before December ends, knowing that the latter quarter of the month is holiday time, but early January if the timeline works out. We, of course, been answering basic questions and compiling facts on questions that we may not have the answers yet. Some of the questions that have come up are, how do we do a hardship waiver? And the answer is we didn't want to make it onerous. It has been based off of the board's consideration, based off of looking at MMOF, but with a caveat that this match is not as high as MMOF, which is as high as 50%. We're asking for 20%, but allowing that potential waiver. And so keeping it open to allow them to explain the hardship and bring in those notifications to the board for approval, if the board would like to give a match reduction request to certain communities throughout that time. And then over the course of a couple of weeks, getting that facts up on the website with some of the questions that have come up that may not have been explained totally on the website or in the NOFO, such as how to do the hardship waiver. There is questions on how long they have to spend the funds. It's a tricky question because, capital construction projects can take some time, but we can't be sitting on funds for years and years at a time. So there's a happy medium to set in there. Fortunately, we don't have some of the more stricter requirements that the federal government does, that we have seen with like the ARPA funds, but there is a potential limit, and we do have to report back to the legislature and, of course, the general public on what the enterprise is doing through our plan dashboard when the grants are finalized. And then, of course, we will be, I think I have this, oh, no, still on this slide. Of course, we'll be sending out a blast email to communities, usually the municipalities and counties in the non-attainment area later in December with the press release and to notify enterprise staff if there are any questions to relay those back to us as well. This is where we're at with the timeline. It says updated timeline. It's updated from when we had discussed back in October, so there's been no updated with that. So the drop dead date for the submission of applications is April 30th. If folks are requiring help with a engineering technical review, if they don't have the capacity within their own organization, we would request to have those in by the last working day of February to give enough time for that technical review to be done through March and April. And then most likely the June, at least scheduled now, the June meeting will be the time for the board to review potential applications and make decisions. And staff will send out notifications, award notices to affected to organizations, municipalities, government entities, whomever gets the application. We will send out award notices to those parties no later than July 31st and start the process with the agreement between the enterprise and that party to get the to develop the grant agreement. And that is it on basic update for the community clean transportation assistance program. We're after a quick snag in October, we're moving forward and seem to be on track. And we'll keep the board updated as anything else happens. But so far, it's been mostly interest, some clarifying questions.
Thanks, Darius. Any questions that anyone has?
Chair, I have a
Yeah.
question or comment. And
Sure.
first, I apologize for not raising my virtual hand. This looks like a different Zoom format, and I can't find the hand raise button. So I'm seeing things like AI companion and apps that I've never seen before, but I cannot find the raise hand. So anyway, I just wanted to comment first that I appreciate the fact that we're willing to give that technical assistance. I think that'll help some of those communities that maybe want to apply for something but don't have that expertise. And then also the Transportation Commission on when it comes to foregoing match requirements, we have that as a process, I think, and Darius can correct me if I'm wrong, the Multimodal Mitigation Options Fund, and that's been very effective in the TC considering case-by-case basis match reduction or elimination requests. So I think that has worked well for us in the past, and I think it'll work well for this committee as well.
Thank you, Director Stockinger. Yeah, I mean, I was just at the Upper Front Range where we were, suggesting that, we waive the match for a couple projects that we had coming through the Upper Front Range. So I think that process does work well. Any other questions? Well, I'm very excited. The website looks great. I've been sending it out to folks who've been, asking about it or when I ask about it. So I sent the link to when we had the North I-25 coalition, and trying to get to groups that, sometimes, you hit different groups in different kinds of ways. So and I hope everybody else has been, kind of trying to send it out and talk it up because I think it's a great program. Thanks for the webinar. I think that'll be really helpful if people do have those questions. I don't think that the only thing I guess the only thing with the timeline is that the board of directors review is scheduled for the summer, so we may want to get a read from folks because that can be a time when people go on vacations or are at conferences and stuff, and so want to make sure that we have quorum that day and that everybody can make that day so we can make sure that we have, full board approval of what moves forward to be funded. So maybe we can just check everybody's temperature. Maybe it's too early yet, but sometime near the beginning of the year of next year and double check that everybody's available that date.
Absolutely. We'll put it on the list for future business.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Okay. Well, it's very exciting to have it out there. So I'm really anxious to see what kind of projects come through and who applies. So I hope we have a good cross section of the non-attainment area and that we get a lot of smaller communities that, maybe don't get a lot of funding for whatever reason. So, yeah, this is great. I think we're probably ready to move on. So now large grants. Our work is not done yet.
Yeah, and thank you, Chair. This
Sure.
presentation is we had a presentation I think a couple months ago on the progress of BRT, and I believe Director Holguin had an offline conversation to answer her questions, and we're working to get one for Director Wheeler as well. Happy to facilitate that with any other board members on BRT programs, but wanted to bring this forward as a potential discussion topic to see how the board would like to proceed regarding this, since it is a little, other than the usual administrative process, it's probably going to be a little bit of a waiting game in terms of when the applications come in for the current program, and see what the board would like what direction the board would like to give to staff to help proceed with this. This slide I have brought back from meetings past, so to speak, on some of the previous board discussions to kind of set the stage for the conversation with its, the agreement on the two grant programs, the focus areas, construction and delivery timelines, authorizing funds for future years. I think we had an extensive discussion with bonding, and it was determined that that is probably not a suitable tool to use just based off of the current conditions. And then taking a look at making sure that the smaller program, while it has a lot of fund this year, that there is an equitable distribution as appropriate for future years funding when making those decisions. Just as a kind of a quick piece on a couple of these slides, this is the bus rapid transit, very basic overview that the Denver Regional Council of Governments has came up with with the 5 corridors that they're working on now. One of which has, I think 2 of which actually has already started construction, East Colfax and Colorado 119, with Federal Boulevard and Colorado Boulevard not far behind it, and then taking a look into the farther future, which includes some of the other corridors on their list as part of that program. Additionally, the North Front Range had presented to us on their recommended transit in their recently adopted 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, which include corridors and implementation of local priorities, and the expansion of existing transit as well, which included bus rapid transit and premium transit analysis, especially on US 34 between Loveland and Greeley. And this was the funding plan that was adopted in the 10-year plan, which include the allocation of $119 million over the course of the 10-year plan to BRT. The board of directors also finalized a general eligibility evaluation criteria in the 10-year plan, and had a determination basically through the small grant program on how to report ozone reduction and how to do DI community support, which could be leveraged in this grant program. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can adjust what the board has already decided and work on those in order to develop this other program. But before I go on to the next slide, which is just the eligibility criteria, it's a long slide with a bunch of words, but it's in the 10-year plan. Wanted to ask if there's any other major considerations for developing this type of program that the board would like staff to consider.
Anything else that the board is thinking of? Director Holguin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I don't know if a consideration, but more of a timeline of when funds would typically be needed for BRT. I know that different ones are in different phases of development, and so I think what would be helpful for me is to better understand what we're looking at, and so that I can get a better assessment of when the funds will be needed. So I don't know that's necessarily needed for this discussion, but that would be really helpful for me. Thanks.
We can ask the potential partners who would be eligible for this type of program and who would apply if they are able to provide some funding timelines. I think there was some timelines in the previous presentation that we're able to help send out again specific to federal, but that's just one project in the plethora of projects that may come forward, and seeing what the timelines would be for North Front Range would be helpful as well, with the caveat that the federal project seems to be the one that is probably the most ready to go to construction right now, just based off of the information that we received over the past couple of years.
And I think that's where it becomes a little bit more complicated, Darius, because and to honor the initial discussions that we had, that we don't want this money to be municipalities or entities or even the federal government's already allocating for these projects, but rather to help them get to that finish line. And so I think that's where the math, the aerobics is going to come through to figure out where those gaps are and where it makes sense. But truly appreciate any input that you might have on that.
Absolutely. And I probably don't have the answers today, but absolutely we can help gather those answers and come back to the board, or perhaps future presentations that will help the board make decisions.
Yeah, thank you, Director Holguin, because I guess, I think about, we have about $7 million that we allocated for maybe the more recent one, or that we have freed up. And, how far does that go? And then, do we, I mean, I don't know that we can commit, future years dollars towards that, but like, our people come back for a second round if they, can only get $7 million and they were really hoping for 10 or 15, and without the ability to bond, like what, and I think that, these are great questions to ask, but what does that strategy look like going forward? Do we want to, make sure that one of these projects really gets off the ground, or do we hope to, do smaller dollar amounts, let's say $10 million to a lot of these different BRT projects? So what makes the most sense strategically? I guess we'll have some further conversations about that, but just kind of curious about, yeah, I mean, as Director Holguin said, what's kind of the strategy going forward, and what do they need, and what's their gap funding, and where what are we exactly providing to help these move through? Director Sunika.
Thank you, Chair Stevens. I have to agree, and thank you for bringing that up, Director Hogan. I feel like committing for multiple years, it kind of limits us, and also limits our communities with any ideas that they come up with in the future if we have our money locked in. Just that's a little bit of a concern to me. I'd rather have it, specific for a specific part of the project or program. And, we can come in and they can certainly, I think we had talked about them also following up with other requests. I wouldn't have a problem looking at multiple grant. If, say, we'll fund this for you for the next year, 2 years later, or whenever they come back and say, okay, look, this is another area of this project that will really help us. But to commit for many years, I think it just kind of ties our hand and it limits the scope for our communities. Also, I wanted to ask Darius about the Dr. Cog project. Is all of that area that you showed us on that map, is that within our funding area?
Yes, the entire, I would say with the exception, the map is a little faded a bit, but any of the colored lines are within the non-attainment area. In Dr. Cog, only Gilpin and Clear Creek County are not.
Okay, thank you.
And all of North Front Range is as well. The parts of Larimer County that are not in the non-attainment area are the northern parts of Larimer County.
Yeah, that's right. The more rural southern, and then all of Weld County is in
All of Weld, yeah.
that's fairly recent, in the past several years, that the northern part of Weld also was included.
Does that mean Wellington is not? Wellington is
not in the
okay.
non-attainment area, unfortunately, because they have some big needs there. Director Stockinger.
Yep, thanks. I did find the hand up button, so
Same.
yeah, a couple things. a couple things to say. I think first off, we have a change in administration at the federal level, which I think, anytime there's that change, it puts into question what funds have already been made available, whether that's going to stick or what it looks like moving forward. Will all of the IIJA funds be available like we expected them to be? Will things like new starts and small starts that our BRT corridors would rely pretty heavily on, is that money still going to be there? So we fell into a little bit of uncertainty in the last month or so on what we're going to be able to do at the federal level. I know for federal BRT, we're talking about a gap pre-change in administration of probably 20 or $30 million that we're going to need, I think, from some other source, whether that be funds that become available in the 10-year plan or from this large project grant program. And then I'd also say once the corridor commits to construction, let's say it's 20 million or let's say it's 30 million. Now, not from the small projects, but from those large projects, if that's the one that's coming on, and I think would make a big difference from a GHG perspective, and has some important core pieces of the corridor that I think are in disproportionately impacted communities, we wouldn't, I don't think, be able to say, well, let's give you 7.62 million for 24-25, but come back next year and then the year after for additional funds. We would need to be able to say, this is our commitment for this corridor. Otherwise, that corridor would not be able to find a contractor and go to construction if they didn't know that the funds would be available. So just something to think about. And I do think that federal is probably the first one that'll be online for construction. And I think that's probably in the 25, 26, or maybe 26, 27 timeframe, with a goal of it being constructed by 2030. So for what that's worth, at least that's what I know today.
Thank you, Director Stockinger. And I think that is really important to think about. I mean, as we go into next year, it may be clearer what the Federal Department of Transportation is, if there's changes that are made, and will those, former grant programs be stay in place as they have, and will we still be the recipient of those dollars as Coloradans? And so I think that there's there is a lot of uncertainty, and I think that it's probably good that we're probably not having those conversations till at least next summer, because I think there's a lot to figure out. The gaps may get bigger. Some projects may not happen, or may happen, the timelines may change. And so I think I'm seeing a lot to evaluate, but Vice Chair Baca, please.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, yes, I'm unmuted. Thank you.
You are breaking up a little bit.
Portion of the presentation. I think it's been a really good discussion. I agree that the federal, I'm so sorry. Let me try this. We're going to have to just navigate the federal policy changes and funding, I think. Unfortunately, that's the position that we're in. I do support the federal BRT. So does this $119 million allocation, is it for all of the priority BRTs, or as they come online, or at the point of applying for grants? And what flexibility is built in if there's another project that were to come along
So the
to be eligible for funding?
So the $119 million is the planned dollars that in the 10-year plan for the large grant program over the course of the 10-year plan. So basically the middle line where it says large grant program is just adding up all those line items. So the flexibility is in the board's decisions and how you would want to allocate it. We know that some of these projects are probably hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not going to be able to fund everything, about how the board would like to proceed with that, knowing some of the limitations. It's a little bit harder with multiple years of funding and so on and so forth than we would with the smaller grant program. I think we're pretty much in place that it's going to have to be some sort of grant. They have to apply to the enterprise. That's pretty much what they would have to do. And they would have to follow whatever criteria and evaluation criteria and be approved by the board of directors, in addition to reporting out basic information such as project, how they're spending the dollars and where they're at to the board. So that way we can fulfill our obligations in regards to the public accountability dashboard that's in statute. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
That does help a lot. Thank you so much, Darius.
Yeah. But ultimately the flexibility is with the board, and these numbers on here, if I could add, may change just based off of the conversation we had previously with the revenue allocation. It was the revenue allocation from last year. And so those may be slightly different come next year, with it usually being more funds, and those can be allocated on the 70-30 basis, with the small grant program not being into consideration. That will stay the same, or that will be out of that consideration. We wouldn't be dipping into that as part of the BRT based off of the policies that the board has approved already.
Okay. Thank you, Darius.
Thank you, Vice Chair and Darius. Yeah, I think there's a lot to contemplate here, right? I mean, when we start thinking about criteria for the large projects, will we look at shovel ready, kind of who needs gap funding? Obviously, we're still going to look at who's, reducing, the pollutants and the emissions, for ground level ozone. And so, which is one of the main factors. And, I think they likely all of these BRT projects serve disproportionately impacted communities. I know federal certainly does, I would, but so yeah, I think a lot of things to consider as we move forward, and how we want to allocate these dollars, and geographically how we want to allocate. And we certainly don't want to give money to a project that's not ready to roll, because we'd rather give a project ready to roll, and then when that another project needs it, so there are a lot of moving pieces here. So I guess we'll hopefully start having those conversations next year as the picture becomes clearer of what's going to happen. But I think these are all really great questions and really great things to consider. Anything else before we move on? Vice Chair Baca, did you have another question, or did you just still have your hand up?
I still have my hand up.
Okay, that's
Sorry
okay.
about that.
Now that we've all found the button, I agree that it's under react for
Exactly.
me, right? The heart, Director Suniga.
Thank you. So when would be I mean, I guess it's hard to know. We don't know what's coming next year, right? So when would it be, do you think, not appropriate, but how soon could we have these discussions? I mean, again, this is trying to read a new administration's mind, but at that time, I think when we have information, I would really like to at least, if it's an additional meeting or something, have a discussion on just what those changes are and how it impacts any of our work here. And more understanding as those issues come forward. So it's just a request. Thank you.
Happy to do so, Director Suniga. Since the administration change happens on January 20th, we'll have we have a potential recommendation for the board, at least in the interim, but happy to do so when that comes up, with at least at the February meeting, if anything is known at that time. Also at that time, the state legislature is in session, and if anything comes up that affects this enterprise, we'll be happy to bring forward things of that nature as well.
Thank you. And thank you, Director Suninga, for suggesting that potentially even an additional meeting to have some of those conversations. I will say, when Darius talked about the legislature coming up, we know in the past sometimes our funds are looked at as a pot of money to do other projects that we hadn't necessarily intended. And so that's something we probably will keep an eye out at the legislature, because everybody's like, oh, there's money in the enterprises. So I think, kind of keeping an eye on that and making sure. I think I think people, legislators are allowed to look at those funds. There's no prohibition on that in any kind of way. But it is something we should probably keep our eye out as monies start getting, as people start, because it's a very, very tight budget year for the state. And so sometimes that means some moving around of dollars that we didn't anticipate. I'll just say that. Thank you.
Thank you both. I do have to run, so I will catch up on the notes after this. Thank you all, and if I don't see you, everyone have a great holiday.
Thanks, Director Siniga. Same to you.
Yeah, you too.
All right, Darius. Well, we'll keep moving.
Sounds good. I'll skip over this slide. This is just the official eligibility criteria that was approved by the board. We do have some of those technical appendices that can be used again, such as the CMAQ emissions calculator toolkit webpage, using the Colorado Enviro screen. We are keeping an eye on the development at CDOT with the Teams tool, and when that is ready, we can bring that forward for discussion again. But for right now, the EnviroScreen website does a pretty good job of identifying the disproportionately impacted communities and the impacts with that. And I think some of these questions that may have been covered, but there is a proposal for a potential meeting, kind of a meeting pause while the potential applications come in, answering questions in January. With what we just said, based on the next administration, that of course is up to the board. But would you like staff at a future meeting, perhaps the February meeting, to come up with a potential proposal that the board can take a look at and provide feedback? Would that be helpful? And then some other questions, which some of them we've already touched on as well.
Okay, any thoughts on these questions up here? Director Furco.
I always find it easier to react to something than try to come up with an idea in a vacuum. So would be appreciative if staff could come up with a concept or two for us to consider.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that staff has kind of heard what the board is thinking, and so probably has some good ideas of where to get started with that.
And we can watch it on YouTube as well.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, and I think for February would be just fine. Are you saying that maybe we would skip a January meeting then?
That is the proposal later in the agenda. Yes.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this topic? Okay. We will move on to budget and program updates.
Thank you, Chair. The budget to actuals report is in the packet that gives you an update of where the funds have been coming and where they've been spent. Most of the expenditures has been on staff support salaries and on legal support from the Department of Law. None of the other items have had expenditures yet. We expect the language transition services to have expenditures then in the near future based on some of the work that's already been done, but none of the other line items have expenditures at this time. And of course, this is from at the end of October of 2024. From a program update, we're working on with the CDOT Communications Office and CDOT Policy and Government Relations on the outreach items, particularly the Policy and Government Relations has the list of all the different contacts in the municipalities and local governments that we can send out a blast email with the press release to. And of course, the communications office on any future press related items. I'm happy to say that the Spanish version of not only the NOFO, but the 10-year plan is now available on the website and is 100% accessible. So we were very happy to get that done and placed on the website to allow anybody to be able to take a look and read on what we're doing. And we will keep both items up to date when if the board takes any action to update the 10-year plan. Continually working on website content to ensure accessibility. Our primary focus has been on the NOFO and the 10-year plan, the most public facing of documents. But of course, there's other documents in there, such as past meeting items and meeting minutes and the board governing documents and those types of things that are important, and we'll continue to work on that. Development of the fiscal year 2026 budget, that is a February decision item for the board, and that will also include the I said the reconciliation of funds. My apologies, that is a typo. It should say the approval of any potential fee adjustments should happen in February. We just did the reconciliation of FY24 funds, and of course, the larger grant BRT program. And then for the consideration for the board to skip the January meeting unless there's any urgent items that that the board would like to discuss, to allow questions to come in, and that will allow staff some time to develop a potential proposal for the larger grant program, or some concepts that the board can take a look at, work on the budget, and start preparing for some of the outreach items for the community clean transportation program, and then come back on February 27th with the adoption of the budget. And I got it right here, the ride share retail delivery fees, and then of course continue conversations in March. So I guess that it's not a formal vote, but if the board would like to have the meeting, staff is happy to accommodate. The primary topics might be large grant program, but staff will need some time in order to put something together for the board's consideration.
Thanks, Darius. Any thoughts on this? I would be in favor of not having the January meeting. I don't want to make work, and I think that because of some of the uncertainty and things that are going on, I think it would be better to just get going in February, but I would happy to entertain any thoughts otherwise, or any support of that idea.
Yeah,
I would
I agree with
support
missing that. Sorry.
Sounds like there's, okay. Sounds like we're okay without a January meeting, and we'll just
Yes.
reconvene in February.
Sounds good. If there is any updates and any major updates in regards to the grant program that's currently outstanding, we'll be happy to send out an email to the board of directors, but not only anticipating usual questions and answers and outreach items between now and then.
That sounds great. All right. Wow, we finished early today. And we won't see each other till February. So thanks everyone. Great meeting. Thanks Darius and staff for all the work on the programs, and we look forward to seeing everybody in February. Happy holidays. Take care of yourselves, be safe, eat a ton of food. And we adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
You.